Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Pastor's Wives podcast. Today's episode was a treat to record for me. I got to interview my sister-in-law, Amber Vickery, who is actually an American. However, she married my brother and she has been living in England for almost 20 years. But before that, she was a single missionary serving over there. She is an incredible worship leader. And then fast forward many years, she has been a pastor's wife for a long time. She has been raising her 4 children over there in England with my brother, and we dive into their life and ministry and all the things that's happening in the UK, and we're excited for you to hear this conversation. So Amber, welcome.
Oh, thank you. It's good to be here.
So we want to know a little bit about your background because we're at your home church where you grew up. Your dad was a pastor here. So tell us a little bit about your childhood, how you were raised. Did you ever walk away from the Lord? Share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so raised in a Christian home. My dad has always been in ministry as far as I can remember. So we were a ministry family. You know, we're the kids who were there early at church and helping set up chairs or doing whatever's needed. And I think I just, from a young age, really loved God and felt he was real and didn't start to question it until I got into junior high, which probably about the right age.
Yeah, great time for everyone.
Yes, great times. But you question, and I think that's a good thing that we question, am I believing this because my parents believe it, or is this just actually, why am I doing this,
Right.
And
Is it true?
Is it true? Is this myself? And I was in public school and you're just learning about all the other religions and how do we know we have the right one? And so it just went through a little maybe rocky season between the ages of 12 and 14 where I was questioning and I was being a little drawn to the world of people wanting to be popular, and praise the Lord, I didn't really dive in too far. I mean, I think, okay, I won't tell you the worst thing I did, but let's not get into those. But, I had a little wayward in my heart anyway. I didn't do anything majorly outright, but that was a good time because I was going to public school and I was seeing kids, my own peers, searching even then at that age for truth, and seeing just an automatic disdain for Christians. And I thought, why? They don't seem to care of the other religions. They're not they're kind of accepting them. Right. But Christians oh, not what you've got. And so that actually made it more real for me and made me dive into why. Maybe the Bible says what the Bible says is true, and God did say the world will hate you. And the message that we're bringing is going to be, unpleasant to the sinner who's not willing to repent. And so that really sparked me on that search for truth and learning those things. And then I committed my life to Christ at 14 years old and have not looked back.
Wow. And did you ever expect to be living in another country?
Definitely not.
So tell us a little bit how that transpired and how you ended up serving in Wales and then now in Oxford in England.
Yeah. So I was working here in California at the Calvary Chapel Bible College at the time. Just really living a really fun life, just serving after I graduated there. I went to the Calvary Chapel Bible College in Marietta, graduated there and got a job on staff doing the AV department and sound, and got to do a choir class because I just love turning everyone into a choir. So watch out. Sorry, I hit the mic.
That's okay.
So it was just a great time. And at that time, my home church here of Calvary Chapel Corona got connected with your dad in Cardiff, Wales, and they were wanting to support and be linked to sister churches. And so everyone was like, oh, you should go out there because, you know Steve and Ruth from Bible College. And I was oh, okay, well, maybe we'll see. It was just really nonchalant about the whole thing, but I somehow went for 3 weeks with a friend at the time and just really enjoyed my time. I didn't think anything of it, but there was a church plant that was starting just about an hour away from Cardiff and Swansea. And they said, oh, would you pray about coming and interning and doing the worship for us? And in my heart, I was like, yeah, okay, we'll check it out. I'll consider it, But I think deep down, I was like, it's not going to happen, I don't know why. I think it's just 'cause I was just very content and happy. But it's usually how God works. He moves us on when we're very comfortable.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it just kept biting at me. It kept niggling at me to pray about Wales. And then I came back with the Lord with all my lists or roadblocks, if you were, of, well, I've got a car payment and I've got this and I've got this. And God just literally removed each one in kind of miraculous ways I would have never expected.
Right.
And he was like, okay, what now? You need to go. And so I went, and just for a year, so my visa's for a year. And it was during that time that I really just felt a love for the people. And I just really felt like, oh man, I think God might be calling me here more permanently. And so I was in Swansea for a year, and just different things changed. And I was then moving on to Cardiff, where Steve, my now husband, was. And
so we overlapped it. Did we overlap? I can't remember if we
for like a
overlapped.
few months.
Okay.
For like a few months.
A few months. So it's like the Lord, I always say, the Lord brought you to Cardiff, Wales, as the Lord was moving me out of Cardiff, Wales, so that you could, fill all those gaps.
Yeah.
Literally by marrying my brother.
I know.
And
I know. Swapping lives.
Swapping lives, being my mum's daughter-in-law.
Yeah.
And so you end up marrying my brother, and he is now pastoring. My dad had retired, and my brother Steve took over the church in Cardiff. So you're being a pastor's wife, ministering.
Straight away.
You
Got
married, and
like,
you were
like
already
6
a
weeks
pastor's
later.
wife.
By the time we got all sorted with paperwork.
So talk a little bit about, because back then it was still a relatively new church, Cardiff. Yeah. It was, a small church. When you plant, there was no Calvary Chapels in Wales. And so when you plant a church and it's, brand new, and you're just doing all the things, you're wearing all the hats. So, and you start having children. How was that, being away from family, moving away from home in this, this new culture? In Wales, which has its own unique culture to England, which we'll talk about.
And its own language.
They're
very proud of.
Which is very difficult to speak.
I know you still know how to say something.
I can say a few things, but we won't embarrass myself.
Yeah.
And so talk a little bit about your time in Cardiff, some of the things that perhaps the Lord showed you or taught you. Did you enjoy that, living there? Was it your hard season because you were away from home? How was that for you in ministry?
Yeah, I think Cardiff was... if I'm honest, it was great. It was a great time. And I think, not saying ministry was always a piece of cake. And as you do with smaller churches, newer churches, and you wear all the hats, so you're leading worship. You have your children with you, and then you're running back and doing Sunday school, and then making sure you're back for the last song. And, it's like, you just have to do it because there's not that many people yet, So at the time, you're just... You're busy, and so there's obviously weary times because you're sleep deprived with the kids, and but it was a great season. And I remember being young, having my first two, and the women were kind of like coming saying, we really want like a women's Bible study or something. Can we do a women's thing? Because the men, for some reason, the men were doing something, and the women were like, hey, what about us? And so I was just like, I just didn't even know what to do with that. I was still very young. I'm not really would consider myself a teacher in that regard, because I feel very called in my worship leading, and
yes, which we're going to talk about.
Okay. And so I was just like, oh, what do I do with that, Lord? And but at the same time, I just didn't think I didn't even know how I could manage it, just time wise, but the Lord brought someone else. There was this young gal who just was coming along, and she had a real heart for women, and so we decided to do just like a once a month get together, like what they call in England a coffee morning. And so, those, and we had a coffee morning, and I asked her to share like from the word, and it turned out she was just really gifted, and she had time on her hands. I said, would you just like help me? Would you just, she kind of took over the women's ministry, but just, I still kind of oversaw it all, but she was scheduling it and, preparing it and leading the Bible studies. And it's like, you don't always have to do it.
Yeah.
You pray in those seasons that God's God will provide someone
Yeah.
else, and He does. And
there's various giftings, and it's very clear that one of your giftings is worship leading. And I think it's important that when we talk about pastors' wives, like what the role that you take in serving in your church can look, very different. And so for you, and you were leading worship, and you're having kids, and the Lord raised up a great godly woman. And did they end up taking? Was it a different woman over
yeah,
the
it's different,
church?
but she's they're very much involved in full-time ministry, and she still
Oh,
teaches the women. Yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
And so I think it's really important to try to discover those gifts of the women in your church. Like
yeah,
you said,
yeah,
you just invited her in, she shared a testimony and realized she had a teaching gift.
yeah, yeah,
And so the Lord
yeah,
provided, for the church in that way.
yeah.
As for somebody now that has 4 kids, fast forward to 4 kids, and then
Mm,
we'll go back to the move in between.
yeah.
Juggling life, family life, kids.
Mm.
What do you think is the most important thing to ensure that you don't just get so overwhelmed you just want to throw in the towel? Because kids
Yes.
can do that to you.
Yeah, kids are the most refining thing.
Yes, they are refining tools.
They're just ever.
Marriage and children.
Yeah, it's like you
And
get
ministry.
you get married, and it's like, okay, I gotta die to myself, and it's all this refining. And they're like, oh, I've got it. I think I've done it.
Yeah.
And then God gives you children,
Yes.
and then you're like, oh, I haven't died enough.
Yeah.
It's like obviously. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and it's definitely there is times when you're just overwhelmed and you're thinking, I mean, this
I
is
mean,
like.
do we ever all figure it out?
No,
don't
I
think
mean
we
half the
ever
time I'm like,
fully-
how am I? I get asked sometimes by other mums like who used to maybe be involved in singing in their church, and they've joined our church. They're like, how are you doing this and doing worship and this? And I'm like, I don't really know. You're just like you're just walking in it. And there was a time when I was questioning, like, should I still be doing it? Because and don't get me wrong, I think if the Lord's telling you to take a break and there is other people to do it, take the break. I'm not advocating that we have to just kill ourselves in the ministry. But, I really did feel the Lord saying, because in my situation at that time in Cardiff, there wasn't really anyone else to lead the worship unless my poor old husband had to do it. But, he's there to preach. And so I really had to inquire of the Lord, what am I supposed to do? Because it was overwhelming. I'm not going to lie. It was tough. It was hard, trying to. And in England, as you know, children stay in for worship. Most churches, we don't drop them off at children's ministry and they get to go.
Yeah.
They join. It's a family worship service, and then they do leave for their own Sunday school. But so that's challenging to have your kids in there the whole time.
So you ever lead in worship and you're like, Gracie, shh, or Charlie.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could tell. I have stories upon stories of the most challenging and hilarious things that have happened to me while I'm on the stage, and I see in the background things. Kids just being kids, and so yes, it's definitely.
And it's hard to imagine sometimes, especially if you grow up in kind of America or Southern California, the mega church, formal environment, and you forget churches around the world, church plants, ministries,
children are there,
look totally different, and their customs are totally different. It's perfectly normal in England that kids stay in the worship, and so that's something to get used to. And in a way it's good because we have older kids in our church even here in the worship, because we found that if kids are never part of big church by the time they turn 18, they've never been. They don't even know what it is. And so like integrate them slowly as they age so that they feel part of the wider body of the bigger church Sunday morning, body of Christ, is a good thing. So challenging if you're the worship leader.
Yeah, and I think it's neat now. I look back because they are so used to seeing me do that.
Yeah,
and they get that opportunity to see both mom and dad serving, and I think
they know the songs, and
they do know the songs, and it's definitely different, unique, and there's good things about both churches that do that different ways, but so
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about worship leading. You come from a whole family of incredible musicians. Like your family gatherings are like, a choir of incredible voices and musicians that are just sing to the Lord. And so you have a rich heritage in music. Your dad is a worship leader here. Can you share a little bit about worship, a little bit about what you think your heart is behind worship as a worship leader, and then maybe some of the things, the current trends that you need to kind of be mindful of, things that you think about when you're choosing songs, things that you think about for the congregation?
Yeah, sure. I think the heart of worship is the most important thing, your motivation and what you're doing. And I think it's hard because there's a sense where you feel from a young age, I just, again, you said I'm a part of a big musical family, and it was just like, oh, this is what we all do. And if you don't sing harmony, who are you? It's just a bit of a, it was just like, oh,
you came out of the womb harmony.
Yeah, pretty much. And, for a while, I thought this is like every family did that at family gatherings. And it wasn't until much later I was like, oh, this isn't normal. Just eat your Thanksgiving meal and then sing hymns for an hour. So yeah, it's just I'm totally thankful and blessed to have been raised in that environment, and so very, very, very grateful. And then being under my dad, who's a worship leader, just really is the one who taught me so much about worship leading and the heart behind it. And worship ultimately, it's congregational. We are together. We are the body. We unite together to offer our praises as that sweet smelling aroma to the Lord, and it's not about me, and that's something we always have to be very, very careful of, that we remember it's not, we all have our personal styles and our likes and dislikes of the song and, styles, and there's a place for those things, but ultimately, it's not about my personal thing, what I like. It's about what's going to work for the congregation, what key is going to make it singable so everyone can join in, so I might have to stretch a little higher, or I might have to stretch a little lower, because I know if I go too low, that just X's out all the men. They just can't sing. So these things that my dad was really instrumental in just reminding me of, showing me as I started leading worship in our youth group, and so I got to learn that from really.
So you think about the key choice. Do you think about anything else when you're choosing songs?
Oh, yeah. So key. And then songs, I feel like songs, they really, really, again, something my dad taught me too, was that, it's really good to start with declaration before you move on to devotion. Because think about it, you come into church service, we need to just remind ourselves who God is and what he's done, because we start with worship. And so we start with declaration and then move on to maybe more devotional songs. It's just a good kind of model I have followed.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And then do you ever did the words or the songs go with the message? Is that, how important is that in choosing songs, or is it more just ensuring that they're doctrinally sound songs? Or
yes, well, married to who I'm married to. No, I just took it. It is always good to make sure they are doctrinally sound, and we need to be very careful with what's going on out in the world and throughout the churches that we are sticking to. I always look at a song and say, what's it saying? Making sure it's biblical and scriptural, which is ultimately very important. And then, but beyond that, is it singable? Because there's lots of great songs on the radio. There's lots of really songs that minister to you on a personal level. But on a Sunday morning, congregationally, it might not really work.
Translate, or
it doesn't translate, or
singable.
And in my situation, we're not in a big band situation where we have full band and everything. So a lot of songs are written for like bands and have all these special little parts, and it doesn't. That'd be a good song, but that actually just on the guitar and a keyboard, it doesn't really translate. So you have to keep those things in mind, or find a way to do them.
And then one thing that I know from your church is even though it's not a full band situation, you'll hear the congregation sing like no other. They sing so loud, which you don't necessarily hear in this day and age. So I think those are key things: the singability and the keys, and the song choice, the lyrics, the song choice. Yeah, that's really really great. So shifting gears a little bit, I want to talk about your moves and your transitions, because you know what it is to move from the Bible Belt, so to speak, of Orange County, or well, you were Riverside County, but Southern California, to Wales, which is just spiritually dead, but then to have a great kind of community at the church, to then leave that again when you had really settled there, to move to Oxford, where you now are at, Calvary Chapel, Oxford in England. So talk a little bit about that move and what was hard and the transition and how the Lord kind of worked in all of that.
Yeah, I think we when you're married to a pastor, you just never know. We just feel like it just reminded me of my just story of even getting to Wales. I was comfortable. I was just so happy, and not that that's a bad thing, it's not that. But when you can get to that, I can't even think of the right way to say this, but yeah, you just get to this place of you're just very contented.
Yeah.
And in a good way. I'm not saying that's bad.
Yeah.
And then God's like, "Oh, guess what?"
Yeah. But you're like, no, I was actually
I was like,
content with my
not
life.
this
It's
again.
amazing.
And I think I knew that it was the Lord because I was like, not this again.
Yeah.
This is what happened me going to Wales. I was so happy with my job, here in California. And then it was like, God's like, guess what?
We're moving.
Yes, we're moving. And so, I still love Wales and I just love the people there. And so it was very hard to leave them. It wasn't necessary.
When you love the people in your
You
church,
love
it's
the
like
people
you're leaving
and
a family, and it's
you are leaving a family, and it was challenging. I have to be so honest with that. It's not always easy, and I would say the first few years was a little tough in my own heart, to like accept this is where God has us, and and it's like I knew this is where God wanted us, and it's like it, but you're still
it doesn't mean you don't miss what was before.
and it doesn't mean you're not gonna like have this little wrestle with God of like I don't know if I really want to do this, and like have that little wrestle time. But God really spoke to me in His Word through Psalm 37, which that verse where it talks about rest in the Lord, do not fret, and all that, and trust in the Lord and do good, and then it says dwell in the land and feed on His faithfulness. And He really spoke to me that when you dwell means make it your home, you abide in it, you dive in deeper when you don't feel like doing something hard, you're struggling, dive in deeper, go hard, because God will bless that. And He did. And once I dwelled in the land, then I learned how to feed on His faithfulness, and it was a feast. It was so good.
Yeah. So then now you're in Calvary Chapel, Oxford. You have your 4 children, and your husband, Steve, my brother, oversees Calvary Chapel, the CCA in the UK. And so talk a little bit about what the Lord is doing in the UK, because I remember we grew up Assemblies of God, and my dad learned about a Calvary Chapel when he was out here with Assemblies of God many, many, many years ago. I want to say Steve was 1, so probably 42 years ago, 43. I don't know. I can't remember how old he is. And so ever since then, which is my whole life, we've been kind of part of a Calvary Chapel and then part of a Baptist church plant, but not a Calvary Chapel, part of Assemblies of God and part of a Baptist church plant. But they were all kind of the same because my dad was a pastor and he was Calvary Chapel and he would teach through the Bible. And so I never really knew any different. And so when I came to an actual Calvary Chapel, it was kind of, the same thing. But in England, when Calvary Chapel started to be planted and nobody really knew what it was, and it didn't have the reputation it does in America of being this, solid Bible teaching church. And so it's taken a long time to plow the ground, and things are going, so well in the UK. So can you talk a little bit about what is happening, with the CCA in the UK? What kind of things are going on over there?
Yeah, it's really exciting, actually, and just such a blessing to be a part of it, because we're really seeing Calvary Chapel kind of get a bit more known, really thanks to some online speakers from here in America and the following, because in a lot of churches in the UK, it's not really a normal concept of verse by verse teaching. There's probably a few churches out there I can't know for sure, but it's not many. You're the churches, and it's kind of like one extreme to the next between charismatic and more reserved or reformed, and so Calvary Chapel's come in, and we're bringing verse by verse. We're touching everything from Genesis to Revelation. I remember talking to somebody who was from another church just there in Oxford through our school that we're connected to, And I said, "Oh yeah, he's like, so what's the deal with these Calvary chapels? Like, what's your thing? Like kind of like every church has its thing." And I said, "Oh, well, we teach verse by verse, all Genesis to Revelation." He was like, "You mean like Deuteronomy?" Like Leviticus. Like he was like,
Why would you do that?
"Yeah, no, I'm serious," because they
Yeah.
think those aren't
Yeah.
as significant or important or what do we get of it? Because it's just so.
And if you teach motivationally, you're like, what can I get out of it?
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's been really exciting. We do, we've started doing, well, say we've started, it's been going on for quite some time, this Teach the Word conferences, which is it's a day conference for the whole family where we gather, for the Calvary chapels around the UK, but opened to many different people because there's lots of people who follow Calvary Chapel online now.
Right, but they don't have one.
They don't have one near them, and so they'll still be a part of the local church, which is great, but they'll listen for the heavy teaching and the rich teaching, and then come to teach the word, and they get really blessed. And it's just there's just an excitement and a hunger for the word that's just we see growing, and I think God is using Calvary Chapel and the CCA to further that, and we're just very, very excited to be a part of it.
That's amazing. And then you guys just came off a women's conference for the women of the UK.
Yeah.
And you guys packed it out. What did you guys do for the women's conference? And I remembered hearing, because in America, we always just like get our catering and we do this. And my mom's like, oh, they're out shopping for the food to make lunch. And I'm like, you made lunch for hundreds of people?
No, not. Yeah, we did. I know. It's we were learning our lessons of what to do.
This is England. This is not America.
This is not America. Well, the church has a kitchen, and so it just thought, oh, we'll just make all the food. We'll just do one meal, and the other meals they have to go find their own way. But yeah, actually, your mom really helped cook the potatoes. So thank you, Julie.
That is very my mom.
That is very your mom and her friend Anne done. Yes. Yeah. So we had it was great. It was I really can't even tell you how special this conference was.
Did you have many from all over?
Yes, all over. Just the different Calvary chapels joining. We had some that have come to our conferences before that aren't Calvary Chapel, but they love Calvary Chapel, and again, they just don't live near one. And we did it on Proverbs 4:23. Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it spring the issues of life, and just went through different topics of the heart, like the contented heart, the submissive heart, pure heart. But yeah, I mean, I can just tell you as a worship leader, that was just the most beautiful singing ever. And it was just like a choir. You can watch it, actually.
Yes, it's on. Is it on the Calvary Chapel UK? CCUK has a YouTube channel that's different to the CCA. It's the extension of the CCA, but they have their own YouTube channel. Yeah. Same as we put our Pastors' Wives podcast on the CCA YouTube. Yes. And so you have that. Yeah, I watched it, and it was wonderful because those ladies really do sing, and they're so grateful to have something to go to. I can't tell you how many times in Wales I heard when people would come to church and they just were blown away. They're like, I have never heard anybody teach like that. Yeah. And it's not that, oh, you're just this amazingly credible, amazingly gifted teacher. It was just that, like, no one's ever just gone through the Bible, and we take it for granted here, but just to go, what does this verse mean? And then what does this verse mean? And then let's apply this to our lives. Yeah. And people would just read a scripture and jump straight to the application and then make it, a pep talk out of it. And that's all anyone ever knew. And that's, they thought that was just normal.
Yeah. We've had people join the church who've been Christians a very long time. And this is the first time they've been in a church that does this. And they're like being blown away. Yeah. There's like, I just never knew this was in there.
And it's amazing to see the hunger that comes from it because they're like, I want to know more, and I want to know more, and I want to know more.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And we can take that for granted here in America. That's just on every corner, but it's not that way around the world. And so it's great to see what the Lord is doing in the UK. I wish I could go be a part of it more. But traveling is not so easy for us. And so it's just amazing to see what the Lord's doing. And what I love about the UK churches, and probably because the UK is like the size of California, so it's easier to do, but the fellowship amongst you guys, because it is, so the churches are kind of, a couple of hours apart, and they're all newer works, and you guys need each other and you depend on each other, and there's just amazing unity that you have. And I think it's so important for those wherever you're ministering as a pastor's wife to to find those like-minded sisters around
Yeah.
you and to link arms with them and to,
Yeah.
you know, get together for lunch or have fellowship together so that you can encourage each other and pray for each other.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I love about what's happening in the UK. So, Amber, I think our time is up, but
Yeah.
thank you for popping in. And
pleasure.
yes, and having our podcast. It's been noisy all around this season of a podcast. We are not in our typical studio, and there's, you know, all kinds of moving parts. But we thank you for joining us for another episode of the Pastors' Wives podcast, and we will be back next week with another guest to share with you about life and ministry. And so we hope that you will join us then. God bless.